I said I'd be back. I'm back. This is Paul Woodadge again for World War II TV Book Reviews Part 2. Again, we are talking about veterans' memoirs, and I just did a show a minute ago, and I told you all I'd come back and do another one, and I'm back. I'm going to do another one. So there we go. So hopefully some of you will join me shortly. So what book are we going to start with? Well, I'm going to start with a not good book, but I'm going to recommend reading it because it'll tell you how to recognize a bad book, if that makes sense. So the bad book, and it's easy to get, and I think a lot of people have bought it, not liked it, and shoved it into secondhand bookshops because there's always loads of copies of it available on A-books and stuff. And it's Patton's Gap by Richard Rohmer. Now, I want to say first, Richard Rohmer, I think, may still be alive. He became an air marshal in Canada, so he's a highly respected, decorated Canadian aviator, and I'm not in any way discrediting his service and what he did for the liberation of Europe and serving his country, etc., etc. He said, caveat. But it's ostensibly about the Falaise Gap, okay? And his hero is Patton. You can kind of give that away on the cover. Unusual for a Canadian to be so pro Patton, and he doesn't like Montgomery. Now, when I say he doesn't like Montgomery, pretty much every page of this book has a Montgomery is a dick comment on it somewhere. He didn't like the way Montgomery handled the Falaise pocket. Other historians have also criticized Montgomery or Bradley or Patton or Guy Simmons or whatever for not closing the pocket sooner, whatever. The thing is, though, it's almost hateful. It's almost, he hasn't tried to be objective. Now, as I said, he's a veteran. He was there. He was flying over it in I think it was a Spitfire or Typhoon, but he was flying over the battlefield, and he has all the right in the world to say who he thinks is at fault or whatever for the Falaise pocket, but it's unrelenting. It's such a difficult read because his anger, and I don't know what Montgomery did to piss him off personally. I could take my camera to my bookshelves, but the thing is, it's all set up here, and it's I could on my phone, I suppose, maybe next time. And I will do another show about from in one evening, a kind of Ask Woody Anything kind of show. I'm just doing some book reviews. So Patton's Gap, if you can get it for, don't spend more than a couple of quid on it. Don't go start spending a fortune on it. But again, I managed to get a copy that was signed. I think mine's signed. Yeah, it's signed there. I think all the ones you get are signed. He must have been doing lots of book signings. But if you read it, you'll get an idea of this is a how to not be objective when writing a book. Lesson 1. It's too personal. It's too opinionated. So again, I will probably add some lists. I'll try and add the list to the book when I do the show. I'll do that later. So that's it. Patton's Gap, Richard Rohmer, is not a good book. I repeat that. It's not a good book, but nevertheless, worth reading in a paradoxical kind of way. Second book. This is a good book. It's going funny with the green screen behind it. Achtung, Minen. It looks weird because the green screens. It's picking up all the green on it there. The Making of a Flail Tank Troop Commander by Ian Hammerton. I've had this a long time. Again, it is signed by Ian Hammerton. So 22nd Dragoons, funny, Flails on D-Day. I think it landed on Juno Beach. And it's a shortish read. It won't take you long to whip through. I think it's fairly readily available. I think it's been reprinted. It's just a good book about how you deal with minefields in flail tanks and how you get Sherman tanks off obstacles and how you deal with the conditions of D-Day, and well written. It's a bit British. He's not terribly revealing about his feelings. That one never fails to entertain. That gets a display the comment, Robbie. That one there, it's awful. I mean, I know you're a dad, so allowed to make dad jokes, but gee, that's bad. Yeah, so it's just a good book. Well, interestingly about Achtung, Minen there is 22nd Dragoons, one of the men in that unit who also commanded a Sherman tank, I think on D-Day or maybe later than D-Day. And Robbie, because Robbie is not only RM military history, he's also fighting on film, one of the two behind that podcast. Ian Carmichael, he of Private's Progress and the other comedies in the 50s. Ian Carmichael, Holditz, was a Sherman Flail commander in Normandy. So there's references to Ian Carmichael in that book, which is kind of neat. So that's an easy read. It just sounds really like it's name dropping now. But another mate of mine, Dr. Hal Baumgarten, D-Day survivor. This is the second edition of his book. And I knew Hal again really well. So it's in My Good Friend and, what does it say? And the most brilliant and talented tour guide. Thanks, Dr. Hal, the late Dr. Hal. So Hal was a Jew in the 29th Infantry Division. He ended up in B Company 116th. He had been in A Company 116th, so he's Omaha Beach, but second wave, but like 15 minutes behind the first wave. And he had a jacket, M41 jacket. They all had a jacket, but he put the Star of David on the back before D-Day, which, if you remember, Steven Spielberg copied for his character in Saving Private Ryan, based on Hal Baumgarten's memoirs. So Hal Baumgarten was wounded 7 times on D-Day, and it's just a very good book about D-Day, and you get to know the men he was with, you get to know how they died, and because basically, although it's that thick, that's mostly D-Day, right? But also his journey of recovery, surgery, this, that, and the other. He had most of his jaw was blown off, blah, blah, blah. He became big friends with Stephen Ambrose, in fact, and wouldn't have any criticism of Stephen Ambrose. And in a way, I admired Dr. Hal's loyalty to Stephen Ambrose. There's some various photos in the book there of Stephen Ambrose, and that's Hal and his wife Rita at the opening of the World War II Museum or something in '94 or something in New Orleans. And he came on to Normandy several times. I was his assistant guide on 2 or 3 occasions. And as a side story, one of my proudest moments ever as a Normandy guide was the bus, World War II Museum. They still do tours. Their tours are worth checking out. You can come over and you can travel with people like James Holland and John McManus. These days, back in the day, though, 10, 15 years ago, you had a World War II veteran or 2 or 3 on the bus with you. Those days have sadly passed. Anyway, we've done 4 or 5 days in Normandy. It's last day or last one day, went to American Cemetery, and the group have been given time to walk around, do the museum, do the visitor center, the graves. Hal said to me, and I'd known Hal several years by then, we'd been pen pals, talked on the telephone, and I even went to visit him in hospital when he had a minor stroke when he was in Normandy. I went to and called him up and telephoned him when he was in Saint-Lô. He ended up being in the 29th Division Hospital in Saint-Lô, which was a fitting place for a 29th Division veteran to be taken. And alas, the last 3 or 4 years didn't see him because his health was declining. He died on Christmas Day, or I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And anyway, they were at the cemetery, and Hal said, while the group were going out, I need you. And he called me over, and he wanted me to accompany him as his official stone bearer. Now, as a Jew, his religion and the way they pay their respect is they take stones and put them on the graves of their buddies. And he always bought these polished stones. He came from Florida, where he lived, and I was his stone bearer. And we just walked round, and we went to the men who he died beside, or he died beside him on Omaha Beach, and his sergeant. And they weren't all Jews. In fact, I don't think any of the graves he went to were Jewish. They were crosses, maybe one Jew. And Hal went, and I handed him a stone, and he would put the stone on the grave, and then he would tell about that guy and say hello to them. And he said, I invited you because you get it. And I thought that's quite an honor, that is. And so I just shut up, and I didn't video it or anything. That would have been terribly distasteful and disrespectful. So I just let him go around. And that may or may not have been his last visit to the cemetery. He wouldn't have come back many times after that. So I was his stone bearer. And that was still a privilege. So Dr. Hal's book, D-Day Survivor, it's just a great book. It's about the recovery after war, all the operations, the surgery, his understanding of his place in the world, he's meeting his wife. There's a great bit about Cecil Breedon, his a medic who saved his life, and his respect for him. And it's good. It's just a good book. Just trustworthy. It's a good book. easy to get, worth reading. I'm just referencing whoever it was of you. Was it Scott? Was it someone who recommended the Men of Company K? So I just thought I would. It's technically it's two veterans who did it, and again, yeah, mine is signed by the two veterans. Is that annoying you, some of you, that nearly all my books are signed by the author or the veteran? Sorry if it is. I am old, and I did know these people when they weren't so old. So that's why I've got signed books by veterans, because I'm 52, not 23. So some of the younger tour guides, they're jealous of the fact I got to know some of these guys. Anyway, so Company K, it's a Battle of the Bulge book, really, and it's good. What can you say? It's just a line company, infantry. You know, it's all about the digging of foxholes, the combat, dealing with anti-tank guns, Germans coming down the road, goes through the Ardennes. It's a good, solid book. So it's not quite a veteran's memoir, in that they're trying to write the company history, but obviously it's through their eyes. But I'm counting it, and as whoever it was mentioned it, I thought I'd mention that one as well. That's that one. Next book is easy to get again, and you can sometimes find signed ones. And again, this is a signed one. This is Look Out Below by Chaplain Francis S. Sampson. And Look Out Below is a double pun there, because look out below, literally, I'm a paratrooper, you don't want me to land on you, but he's a chaplain, so he said he was God's look out below. He's God's representative. See what he did there? And Francis Sampson became the head chaplain in the Vietnam era. So this goes through all the his service in Vietnam. He was a prisoner of war, captured in the Ardennes. So there's a picture of him somewhere in here with his stalag photo. I won't be able to find it now. I'm looking for it. But there's a photo of his prisoner where he looks all kind of gnarly and angry. He was taken somewhere in the Ardennes in the 80s. I can't find it now. I'm looking for it. But that photo there is that side is the one when he was in Vietnam. So he's the chap on that side there with the glasses. And now you see, he was a chaplain, but he's actually quite witty. I mean, not that I'm saying chaplains can't be witty, but he's honest. He's a proper. I'm an atheist. Maybe you know that, some of you. But I liked Chaplain Samson because he was a soldier's chaplain, where he realized his job is not just to talk about God all the time, but which isn't wrong if you want that. But he's like a bigger brother, dad to these guys. There's a famous story, I think it's in the book, where he went to Howard Johnson, commander of the 501st, and there was a problem. This is in training in Fort Benning, wherever they were in the States, of men going off to see hookers, basically. And Samson goes in sort of to say to the Johnson about whether or not the commanding officer shouldn't do some kind of, briefing to the men about not going to see whores. And Johnson says to Samson, look, Captain, you're in charge of their souls. Let me be in charge of their libido, their dicks, essentially. And Johnson kind of said, look, it's out of your area here. If you, by all means, tell them to take precautions, but they're soldiers. Let them do that. And Samson kind of talks about that kind of stuff in the book. So it goes World War II, working for the chaplain department after war, Vietnam, and he was very active in the 101st Airborne Association for you. So all the copies of this book, I think, at least then, were printed by the 101st Airborne Association, because it was them that actually printed the books and made it available. So, like Rendezvous with Destiny, same publishers. So, Look Out Below is a good read. It does have some stuff about religion in it. You would be surprised if it didn't, given that it's a book by a chaplain. But yeah, it's definitely. I've got two copies of it, Ralph. Maybe I'll spare you one, because you said you wanted to have. My other copy of this was owned by Jumpin' Joe Biley of I Company 506. It's got his stamp in the front. So I've got two copies of this. So there we are. So now I'm going to go back to Canada again, and Battle Diary from D-Day and Normandy to the Zuider Z and VE by Charles. Oh, I forgot to do a story about I'll come back and tell a story about Samson in a minute. Charles Cromwell Martin, who was sort of 5'5", Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, landed on D-Day, walked his men for a minefield, nearly blew himself up in a mine, got his men Queen's Own Rifles into Annecy, and it goes all the way through the war. Again, it's a slim volume. You can kind of thrash it out in a night, really. And it's a pretty good account. It's not as good as some other books I've mentioned. It's not quite as rip-roaring as Don Burgett or Sidney Jarry, but it's still very good. And mine is signed by Charles Cromwell Martin. Is this getting a bit of a recurring theme now? It kind of is. Some of these may be out of print, but these days there's not so much anything out of print these days. And you can always find them on ebooks and eBay and stuff. So, yeah. So Battle Diary, Charles Cromwell Martin. So definitely worth reading. To go back to Francis Sampson, there's a lot of nonsense on the internet about Dick Winters of E Company 506 being recommended for the Medal of Honor and not getting it, and only receiving the Distinguished Service Cross. It's nonsense. Dick Winters was written up for Distinguished Service Cross. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, and that's it. And anything beyond the Distinguished Service Cross for Brecourt Manor on D-Day would, in my opinion, as a Normandy historian, have been too much. What Winters did at Brecourt was very good, but it wasn't very good enough to be Medal of Honor, which should Medal of Honor, like Victoria Cross, should be where you go, oh my God, he did what? That's what you should have with a Medal of Honor action. What Winters did was, my God, that's impressive, but it's Distinguished Service Cross, not Medal of Honor. And so he was never written up for the Medal of Honor, and there was this campaign running up until Major Winters passed away to have his Distinguished Service Cross upgraded to the Medal of Honor. And as I recall, even Dick Winters was not behind this campaign. And I didn't understand it, because there was this idea that these people were saying that somehow the Distinguished Service Cross wasn't worthy enough. You go, for fuck's sake, it's a Distinguished Service Cross. If you come out of the military and you've earned the Distinguished Service Cross, you've done well, okay? If you've got the Silver Star, you've done well. If you've got the Bronze Star, you've done well. So any idea of the Distinguished Service Cross not being somehow special enough for Winters is just bollocks, okay? Distinguished Service Crosses, you've done really, really well. Stuart Robertson, yeah, it's Charlie Martin's book. He's honest, and yeah, and you're right. You're right there. There's a little bit of me in Burgett and Baumgarten, but there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd rather people revisit it. They're all different things. These books have different purposes, and people write in different ways, and some people are show-offs and some people aren't, and some people anyways, that's so. But anyway, the point I'm making, God, I'll get there in the end, is Francis Sampson was recommended for the Medal of Honor for manning an aid station and doing these kind of the Germans were going to overrun his aid stations in Haute Adville or Basse Adville, and his aid station there that he did this kind of truce with the Germans and he was turned. And this, I'm not just saying this based on nothing. The paperwork has been discovered where he was recommended and put through for the Medal of Honor by, I suppose it would have been Maxwell Taylor, and for whatever reason it was dropped down. But no such paperwork exists for Major Winters, because, or as he was at the time, Lieutenant Winters, because there was no ever any suggestion that he should have received the Medal of Honor. So, but Samson maybe should have got the Medal of Honor for what he did on D-Day. And I bet some of you are thinking, but I've never heard of him before. Well, that's it. That's why I'm suggesting read his book. There's lots of stuff about Samson in Mark Bando's books. I think he's covered in 4 Stars to Hell about the 501st. There's talking there about Samson. In fact, I think I even mentioned Samson in my Angels of Mercy book, if I'm not forgetting my own book. So that's that one. Off to Norway now. Skis Against the Atom is, to the best of my knowledge, the only English language version of a book written by one of the Norwegians who did all the skiing down into the Vemork to blow up the Telemark heavy water plant. There are lots of good reappraisals of that history. Even Ray Mears, the survival guy on BBC, did a book about the heroes of Telemark that's pretty good. And there's been documentaries, and there's TV shows, and there's the film Heroes of Telemark. And lots of people have tackled that subject as a historian, and they're all very worthy. But unless someone can correct me, the only book written by one of the guys, so Knut Halklid, and apologies to Norwegians for butchering his name, that was translated into English is this one here. And there were two Knuts in that team, and he was involved in the putting the bomb on the ferry that was going across the lake, and he was involved in the second team of saboteurs, but he talks about that as well. So again, it's a pretty brief read, and yeah, sorry, again, it's signed again. Sorry, that is really annoying you, isn't it? But if you want to read about what was going on in Norway from the point of view of a Norwegian participant, that's the book. You'd need to read it in conjunction with one of those more historical kind of, as I said a minute ago, those kind of putting the whole thing in context to get the full story. But it's good. One of my favorite bits in that book is when they're hiding. This is after they've skied in, they've blown up the factory, they've got into the mountains, and they live on on reindeer moss for like an entire winter. It's terrible conditions. But he talks about the fact the Germans sent like an Alpine division to find these like 8 guys, and he makes this big statement that you can't find 8 guys with a division. If you want to find 8 guys, you send 20 guys. And he uses it as a kind of an analogy to like the modern terrorism kind of thing, in that if you're trying to hunt a Bin Laden type of guy, you can't send the 6th Fleet to find Bin Laden. You have to send Navy SEALs. So he recognizes this idea of the early idea of how do you combat against special forces, because he basically said that because they sent a division out of us, we heard them coming. How can you not hear an entire division coming? So they just kind of moved from place to place. He said, if the Germans had wanted to get us, we had no strength left. We were living on reindeer moss. They should have sent in like 20, as I said, 25 specialist kind of Arctic warfare, Goebbels, Jaeger kind of German guys, and sent them off, and they probably would have got them. But no, the Germans sent it wasn't an entire division, but it was like a lot of guys. Okay, so that's a good book, Skis Against the Atom. Oh yeah, George Koskiemaki covers. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right there, Philippe. Samson's story there. Yeah. So my final book, Vietnam. I don't talk about Vietnam because this is World War II TV, not Vietnam TV. But I wanted to mention this one because I bet a lot of you have read We Were Soldiers by Joseph Galloway and what's his name? His name's just gone out of my head. The commander, played by Mel Gibson. Forgot his name. Just got out of my head. And it's a great book. What was that guy's name? Anyway, We Were Soldiers is a great book. Don't get me wrong. It's a good book. And I particularly love the bit about the Cornish. Hal Moore. Thank you, Craig. Hal Moore. The bit about the guy from Cornwall, who the officer who later on was in the Twin Towers on 9/11. Rick Rescorla. I love that story in there. But Larry Gwin was on the other LZ, as I would say, LZ as they would say. Hal Moore was Albany. The other one was, I'm forgetting which LZ it is. It doesn't matter. And Larry Gwin was there. And so it covers some of those same events, but it takes the story beyond the movie, and the kind of ends with the Mel Gibson being taken away and Sam Elliott and blah, blah, blah. This goes on to what happened in the next couple of days. And also it goes on about his special forces, these kind of, the going behind the lines, 4-man teams into the jungle to kill VCs. There's all this kind of behind the line stuff. And the reason I got, Pappy Burrington, I don't like Pappy Burrington's book. I read it. I don't have a copy anymore. I never liked Pappy Burrington's book. Sorry, Scott. He was at X-Ray. That's right. Hal Moore was at Albany. That's right. It's been a long time since I've read this book. Now, I got to know Larry Gwin because Larry Gwin is a mate of Paul Clifford. And many of you will know Paul Clifford. Paul Clifford is comes to Normandy every year. Well, not this year or last year. He donated by the windows, Angevilla plan. Vietnam veteran himself. Just about the nicest guy you'd ever meet, who never has a negative word to say about anybody, supports people like myself and all these other podcasters and foundations. And Paul Clifford is just a lovely sweetheart of a guy. And if you're watching this, Paul, if your ears are burning and you're feeling embarrassed. Well, tough. You are an amazing guy. And Larry Gwin is amazing. So I got to meet Larry Gwin, and so Baptism is a really good Vietnam book. Now, I say that, by the way, as someone who doesn't know enough about the Vietnam War to know whether or not they've got the details of the battles right. I don't. I've got like 6 books on the Vietnam War. That's maybe a bit more that cover it a little bit. It's not my area of special knowledge at all. I wouldn't ever claim it was. But we're talking about books that are good reads. And Baptism is a really good read. It's you can imagine it being made into a film script as well. And Larry knew Joe Gallery, knew Hal Moore, knew all those guys. And so it's nice, isn't it? Don't you think it's nice when you're reading a book about something that you think you know about, but you've got that different angle on it, that slightly other point of view. So Baptism I would recommend, as well as so that's that one there. And that's pretty much brought me to the end of another little set of books I like. And it does, Stuart made the point that some people's books are a bit me, some are a bit humble. Some of the too humble ones, you don't get the honesty. So it's about balance, isn't it? And again, if you read enough of these books, like Stuart has, and like some of these other guys here, Scott Grimwood and JD, you start to get a sense of, not reading just one doesn't work. You've got to read a variety of them. And then you kind of understand what books work and how they compare against each other. Stephen Finn, I haven't read, I don't think, anything about German veterans on the Eastern Front. I'm only this last year really getting into reading about the Eastern Front, and it's just opened up another whole world of things to learn more about. And I realized my knowledge is sadly lacking in some of these things. I'm not a great, about Compton's book, it's all right. Yeah, I quite like it. It's not one of my favorites. I haven't read Little Ship Big War, and I do need to get more naval books in my reading, and aviation books as well. All-time favorite personal history, I don't know, maybe Men at Arnhem by as we know now, Geoffrey Powell writing as Tom Angus is a really, really good book. I do like With the Old Breed, which I didn't mention tonight. I do like Ken Tout. I didn't do Ken Tout's books. I think Ken Tout's books are really good. But I can't ever name one book. I just can't do it. There's too many good ones, and too many that you get something out of. I think that's the thing. Even the not so good books, you get something out of. Even that Richard Rohmer book about Patton, as I said, Patton's Gap, I still think it's worth reading, because it just gives you an idea of how, as I said, how not to write a book, but unobjectively. It's all 30 Seconds of a Toker. I have read that a long time ago, and God Is My Co-Pilot. Was that James L. Scott? A bit too religious for my liking. I'll tell you a book. This is an interesting one. When Unbroken came out. Now, Unbroken isn't an autobiography. It's Laura Hillebrand's book about Louis Zamperini. And when it came out, it was doing all that. It was, and then it became the film with Angelina Jolie. And everyone said you should read Unbroken. I said I don't need to. I've read the story before, because I had read years ago Louis Zamperini's own book he wrote. And someone would maybe tell me what it was. He wrote the very same story that Laura then took and put into her book. He wrote, and I read it, and he may have been an incredible hero, but he was an awful writer. And he knew that, which is why he went to Laura Hillebrand later on. And somehow his book managed to make kind of surviving on a life raft, eating seagull boring. And repetitive, and the accounts of the prisoner of war camp seemed to be tiresome when you read it in his words. And so I probably was one of the last guys to actually read Unbroken, because it was like, I know the story. And then when I read it, I was like, well, it's suddenly amazing. And I suppose it taught me a lesson that even the best story told badly is still a crap story, and a lesser story told well can be a better story. in the Pen and Sword, for example, they're publishing all sorts of memoirs now, and people are coming with, you can get books now, not just Pen and Sword, on like a guy who drove a truck for one weekend in the Battle of Monte Cassino kind of thing, and you think, well, that's not very much to make a book out of, but actually it could still be brilliant. Or you can have another guy who did 17 campaigns and earned 14,000 medals and was there, and the book is boring. It's not about the battles, it's about how well the story is told. And even if a book, in the case of personal memoirs, and this is where historians watching will maybe disagree with me, if the account puts me there, even if it's got mistakes in it, it's got value. But this is like with movies again. You need to read them in context. Like Don Baguette's book is a good book, but you need to read the books that set it into context. Read a book like Peter Caddick Adams' Snow and Steel about the Ardennes, or you read whatever. I can't think of an example, Mark Bando or George Koskimaki or something, and you kind of put it into text. Yeah, the Pierre Klosterman's book is a really good book as well. James Holland and Al Murray read that one for the We Have Ways of Making You Talk podcast last year, it's a good book. It's a very good book. And yes, Stephen, I probably will do an Ask Me Another Anything book. I nearly recommended, but I couldn't because it's not one book. Those who watched me, I did the interview with McDonald's company commander. Yeah, that's good. And of course, I should mention. Oh, I forgot to do that. Quartered Safe Out Here, George MacDonald Fraser. Oh my God, that isn't that a good book? Who wrote Flashman novels? Anything by George MacDonald Fraser, just get it. I could do an entire show just on his books, actually thinking about it, and I should do that. I forgot. I was in the middle of something. I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say then. Get McDonald's Time for Trumpet. That's not a good book. There are some great books. But yeah, so the point I was going to make is, even if the book has factual mistakes, which they may have, if it helps place you in the battle and gives you an emotional understanding of the battle, it still has its place. And as I say, then use that in conjunction with the Arthur Action reports or the morning reports or the aerial photos. And you can kind of, there's a bit in Don Baguette's books, Courageous Screaming Eagle in Normandy, where he talks about the Battle of Buddy Gulch, where he's moving forward because A Company 506 are actually moving forward while some other units are going backwards. It's that confusing morning of June the 13th. And his book says something like, we crossed hedgerow after hedgerow, field after field, as shells were exploding around us. When you actually go there, it's like two fields. And you think, well, how can it be hedgerow after hedgerow after hedgerow? And you go, well, because that's how it seemed at the time. That's how it seemed at the time. It was probably two hedgerows, and that's where, and I've been in that field with Don Baguette. And Alan Bryson used to work with another talk. I remember this moment where Don Baguette actually had a horrible flashback. And he's on his knees in this field, kind of, I can see them. And he had this horrible moment where he was transported back. And when he stood up again, we were like, what the hell happened there, Don? He was like, what the hell happened where? I said, well, you were on the knees. No, I wasn't. And he kind of denied having it. And we can look at the mud on your knees, Don. What mud on my knees? He said, you just had a moment. And he had this psychiatrist would explain what it was, some kind of episode. They lasted about 30 seconds. And then he rolled up his sleeve, as he often would do, and he would show the groove in his arm where the shrapnel that he wears around his neck, or wore around his neck on a cord, of the shrapnel that went through his backpack, through his backpack and into his arm. And one of his party tricks was rolling a marble up the groove in his arm and back again, like. So when a guy is there and he's been blown up like that, and he and whether Don embellished some things in his book, and yeah, he did. The fact he was wounded in that battle gives him license to, as I said with the Bill Sefton book, to talk about it however the hell he wants, and it's still a really gripping read, and it's got that comic book page turning quality that I think is important. It's no point having a book that's so factually correct it becomes dry and everybody gives up after 10 pages. What's the point of that? Exactly. So it's a terrible memoir that was impeccably sourced. And sometimes you just don't like the guy who you're writing. We don't like everybody. Sometimes you don't like Webster's book Easy Company, Parish Infantry. Some people love it, some people hate it, because he was a particular type of person. He was a Webster. And I like his book. Some people don't like it. Anything by C.S. Forrester, it's got to be good, isn't it? You know, although maybe not all of the books, but you know, I haven't. It's been a long time since I read The Ship, so I can't remember. I haven't read Dispatches by Michael Herr. I haven't read that, so yeah. And again, at some point, I will do some other reviews of other books not written by memoir veterans, but they're just some of my favorite veterans books. And as I said, I think the lesson is with veterans books is to not base everything on them. And I think there has been a trend recently for documentaries to base too much on what veterans have told them 70 plus years on, which is tempting to do, but without doing the double checking, without checking the dates and the details. And I'm not in any way saying that oral histories with veterans is unimportant, because of course it's very important, and our understanding of the emotional effects of war is important to get. And yeah, but you cross-check, cross-reference, check things out, and just tales told by veterans without any kind of sourcing and referencing, and they're almost more damaging. So, but that's modern people take it. A veteran's account is still valid as a veteran's account. German accounts, there aren't that many. Someone's going to ask, Franz Gockel's book on D-Day is much better than Heinz Severlow's book on D-Day, but Franz Gockel's book, I think, is only still available in French or German. I don't think it's available in English. Only Heinz Severlow's is in English. And Heinz Severlow, the supposed butcher of Omaha, it's just a terrible book, terrible read, in my humble opinion. Franz Gockel's book is much more honest, much more, in some ways boring, but realistic about being a young German kid in Normandy. And he talks as much about helping the French family milk the cows as he does about actually being on Omaha Beach, overlooking the beach on D-Day, and it's all the better for it. Heinz Severlow's book is all sensation and not very good. So there we are. So that's some veterans memoirs. I will probably try and list these books and put them in there for you when I play it back, and add the titles in there. I hope some of them are still, I'm sure some of them are readily available. Some maybe aren't as available, but they're all worth reading. And if it comes from me, it's because I genuinely think it's worth reading. And I mean, like Hal Baumgarten's book on the 29th, for example, you get that understanding of surgery and rehabilitation and the process that goes behind that. That's interesting. Maybe there are better accounts of the action on Omaha Beach, but that's not the point. The book is what he remembers and what he did. And the guy was wounded 7 times on D-Day, so and not minor wounds. So yeah, they're all worth something. Well, I'm rambling now. So yeah, so that's interesting. I can do another one of these. If maybe in the comments after this, tell me what you'd like me to review next. Do you want me to do aviation books, or Normandy books, or British books, or aviation books, or revisionist books? Or I do have to be careful about books I don't like, because there may be a book I don't like by an author whose other books I do like, who I may want to invite on a show at some point. It's safe to say if the author is dead, I'm not particularly bothered, because I won't be inviting them on a show. But I don't want to kind of get into bashing people's work if they are people who I may be wanting to go on a show. And that doesn't mean that I don't have standards, because there are some authors who's have several books that I think are good, and another one that's a weaker one of the books, or it doesn't mean I wouldn't have them on my show because one book is weaker, and it doesn't mean we can't use it as a starting point. And some authors have admitted that some of their books are not as good as other books, if that makes sense. So I don't want to do too many negative things about people who are still alive. And as I say, I have to say, in all my years of reading books, very few books have I actually wanted to throw across the room. In fact, one person I really am not bothered whether he wants to come on my show or not, and that's Anthony Beevor. I really don't like his more recent writing at all. I do quite like Berlin and Stalingrad, but I'm not a Berlin and Stalingrad expert, so I found them easy to read. But I didn't like his Arnhem book at all. I didn't like his Normandy book at all. And he's busy making a mini-series or films for someone, isn't he? He was announced recently as being part of a big thing doing a film, so I don't think he's going to have any time to work with me anyway. So I don't mind admitting I'm not a great fan of Anthony Beevor, but some of the other people, and some people's books, just because they're considered passé now doesn't mean, again, they're not worthy to read. I think in our Normandy historiography show, I still think Overlord by Max Hastings is worth reading and owning a copy of, even though some of his conclusions I would consider by today's understanding of the battle are, I don't want to say not correct, but of their time. But that, again, it's part of the journey. It's part of the read Ambrose, read Hastings, read Beevor, read McManus, read Robin Islands, those people, and then all the others, and then you'll kind of go, okay, where's the truth in all this? Which is the best interpretation of this? And as I said earlier, there is no best interpretation. It's just an interpretation. So a book can still be worth reading, even if it's not brilliant. But so yeah, in the years I've been reading books, and I've got about, whatever it is, 1,200 or something over in the other room. Very few that are really bad. I have given away a few books that just are so bad, but I don't remember what they were now. It's usually those little kind of generic-y ones, little kind of, ones you buy in a museum that you think, the $5.99 kind of ones that just are so basic they don't cover anything in any level, that kind of thing. Oh no, there is that book by that woman. And it's not because she's a woman. Women are brilliant historians. The woman who was going about the Americans being rapists in 1944. She was University of Wisconsin or something. That book just, and it's not that what she said wasn't necessarily true. I'm sure there are cases of rape and murder and stuff. But it was just this agenda she had of all men are bastards all the way through the book, rather like Richard Rohmer and his Montgomery was a twat all the way through, where Richard Rohmer doesn't have that voice. Those books, when they're banging at the drum all the way through the book to make their point, kind of annoy me. If you want to get to a conclusion, if you want to conclude that Allied tanks are better than German tanks, or the 8th Air Force's techniques are better than the 9th, or whatever it was, by all means make that point and conclude it, but don't start and bang me over the head with that point all the way through. Like those, actually, another book I didn't like, Killing Patton by what's his face, the same series, Killing Lincoln and Killing Kennedy, and what was that guy's name, the newscaster guy. That is just a dreadful book because there's been this rumor for bloody ages that Patton was bumped off by the OSS, whatever it was, and people have looked into it. They probably looked into it at the time, and like the fact that Rudolf Hess was a fake and it was imposter. These have been looked at and dismissed years ago. So Bill O'Reilly, isn't it? Bill O'Reilly, Killing Patton. So he writes the Killing Patton book, and I was given it. I didn't buy it. I was given it by a customer, and he's decided, I don't even think he writes them. I think it's his ghostwriters. He's decided there's a case that Patton was bumped off, and so his whole book is trying to prove that thread, and doesn't mention the balanced book should be, is there any evidence? As I said on my Ask Me Anything, in fact, I'm wearing that same hoodie today. The what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. It's all very well to assert that Patton was bumped off by whatever, but you've got to have some evidence behind it, and you've got to look at the alternative. It's Occam's razor, isn't it? The most likely explanation is usually the truth. So when you're looking at Patton's death in 1944, yes, maybe the OSS bumped him off by arranging for something to hit the car to make sure that he was hit, that they hit him in the back of the head, so he died in the hospital a few weeks later. But more likely is it was a car accident, a tragedy that he was killed. If you were trying to bump off a general in 1945, just have a mine in the road. Just have an errant German soldier who just goes crazy machine gun. Why to go to some? There's plenty of reasons. If you wanted to bump someone off, less convoluted than the one that actually killed him. So I've gone off on a tangent again. So yeah, that's a book that was truly bad. But really, there aren't that many terrible books. But yeah, I'm gonna cut it short now because I've been rambling too much. But there's some of my favorite books. So yeah, let me know in some comments if you'd like me to tackle a particular genre of books, Arnhem books, Airborne books, Commando books, Canadian books, and I'll do a show about them. Won't do it today because well, maybe I will today, but I don't know, later. And I'll do that. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously you're all going to put different things, but if there's a particular support for one genre of books, I'll do that. And again, I want to make it clear, I'm just a guy who lives in Normandy. I've just read a lot of books, but my opinion is not by any means definitive. I mean, other people will disagree with what I say and say he's wrong about that. That's a crap book. I don't care. This is just my opinion. I like music some people don't like. I like films that other people don't like. This is just what I think about these books, because you can't choose whether you like or don't like something. You either do or you don't, do you? So when you finish a book, you've either enjoyed it or you haven't. And you can't, even if a book's well written, if you don't enjoy it, you still haven't enjoyed it. You can't, as Craig was saying about the book that was well sourced but just didn't like it. So these are strictly my opinions. It's what I think, and you may disagree with me. And indeed, that's fine. That's how history works. You can disagree with me. If you do disagree with me, say why. Say, I felt I didn't like that book because it did this. Tell me why. And then it makes for interesting conversation. So there we are. No one's commented recently there. So you're oh no, they have. I just haven't scrolled down. Oh my God. Yeah. So that's it. So, oh, yeah, you have been. O'Reilly did the 87. Oh, God, O'Reilly. A Man Called Intrepid, William Stevenson. That's a good book, isn't it? Although apparently, yeah, good at the time, but now been proven to not be quite as reliable as we thought it was. And they're making up stuff because they don't have access to it. So SOE, secret stuff, they're inventing stuff because they don't have access to the archive. So yeah, that was a classic, wasn't it, back in the day? But I don't think Man Called Intrepid is regarded so well now. Yeah, so there we are. Personal diaries. There's all sorts of books, and yeah, Beaver's definitely a bottom shelfer. I agree with that, Adrian. But again, worth reading, because if you read a book you don't like, it then makes you realize again that there's another book that you do like more. So there we are. Tell me what I should do next, and I'll do that next time. So this is Paul Woodadge for World War II TV, saying thank you for joining me, and I will see you all again next time. Don't forget, in our regular programming tomorrow, we've got 2 shows. So Ellen Hampton is coming on at 4 o'clock. So this we'll be just finishing the show this time tomorrow about the Rochambeau, the female unit attached to the French Second Army Division. Then later in the evening, at 7 p.m. UK, we've got Samantha Cowan from Canada talking about remembrance tourism. So she's not a historian per se. She's runs tours, goes to Vimy and Dieppe and Hong Kong. And so she's going to give us perspective of how tourism to the battlefields has changed from a Canadian point of view, big tours. And she was at the big Vimy Ridge one. So that'll be interesting, and Dieppe, and so that'll be good. And then Thursday, we've got Sobibor, and Friday we've got Kaya Alderson talking about the postal unit, the African-American postal unit 6888. And then that concludes this week of programming. So there we are. So thanks everybody for watching. And I can't believe none of you have got anything better to do than the afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, to listen to me rabbit on about books. But I could make this into a regular feature, couldn't I? Covering different subjects. In fact, there we are. I'll make a little section now, playlist of Woody's book reviews. Good. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time. Cheers. Good afternoon.